Let's go down to the announcement of the PM's second-term ministry this afternoon. Some interesting choices: promoting Murray Watt into environment, shunting Tanya Plibersek out of environment into the social services gig, which is a sort of going nowhere job unless reform's on the table. Reform's not on the table. This is now just about handing out welfare payments, not much else. So she's been certainly sidelined. Interestingly, despite Labor criticising and then unwinding the Morrison-era changes to the Home Affairs portfolio, a whole lot of them have been added back in. ASIO, the Federal Police, all those will now stay with Tony Burke. He stays in that gig. Surprisingly, too, here, the NDIS, well, that'll move from the social services area, again, gutting the job that the Prime Minister's given Plibersek, and it'll move over to health, where it will grow to be an even bigger portfolio under the current minister and would-be leadership aspirant from the left, Mark Butler. On energy, no hope here for the country, because it will stay with the hapless Chris Bowen. Joining me now, Sky News political contributor Chris Uhlmann. Chris, a fair amount of factional payback here. A number of MPs dumped by their faction. Now, this wasn't the Prime Minister's doing, this was the faction. In the case of Ed Husic, it's the right that dumped him, but also some political squaring off, and this was under the pen of the Prime Minister, the way in which she's really treated Tanya Plibersek. It's a cul-de-sac, if I can call it that, the social services portfolio, if no reforms on the table. What did you make of today?
Yeah, well, as far as Ed Husic was concerned, it was a fight between two parts of the right, the Victorian right and the New South Wales right, and it was the Victorian right that won in the end. I was a little surprised about the way that Ed Husic dealt with that. I didn't think that throwing all of the toys out of the cot, which he clearly did, and days after that, in his appearance on Insiders and getting the former Prime Minister Paul Keating to write in his favour, and Paul Keating saying in the midst of that there wasn't any intellectual grunt in the Victorian right. Well, I think that's belied by some of the people who are coming in. If Ed Husic wanted a long stay in the party and a top job in future, then I think he's put his cause back with the way he's behaved. And I think of all the people, Peter, who lost their jobs and lost their place in Parliament, and all the people in this building at the moment who are clearing out their desks. Ed Husic gets to stay. He should probably look at the way that Keith Wallahan dealt with the way that he left Parliament, with real dignity and grace. And I think that there are a lot of people hurting at the moment. Losing your ministry is not as bad as losing your job in Parliament. As far as Tanya Plibersek is concerned, it's no secret at all, of course, that the Prime Minister and Tanya Plibersek have been rivals for a long time. She had to stay in Cabinet. She has the talent to do it. She's got the support inside the party to do it. But yes, at the moment, under this Prime Minister, her career is on hold.
You mentioned there some bright young things, and I want to mention a couple of those. Dr. Andrew Charlton, he's now the new Cabinet Secretary. That means he'll have a role in policy development. Now, I think this is a really good thing. I had a bit to do with him when he was in Kevin Rudd's office as the chief economist, and a bit later on outside the Parliament before he stood obviously for Parramatta. I think he's got a good brain, a big brain, and I think that he will at least provide, I hope, some contestability around the cabinet table to all the usual dumb ideas that get thrown up by department and that weak ministers then just regurgitate and try and get up. You need someone to knock some of that out. Also from Victorian right is Dan Merlino. Now, Husic saying, or Keating saying, there's not many smart people. This bloke has got an economics PhD from Yale. I don't know him, but I suspect that's pretty telling. That says he's pretty clever. So I hope you're going to see some intellectual pressure here and some political pressure on people like Jim Chalmers, because I think we've got some really difficult decisions coming forward, not just in energy, obviously, but in the broader economy.
Yeah, well, Andrew Charlton's credentials speak for themselves. I don't claim to know him well. I knew him from the time I knew him when he was around the Rudd government, but then he went out and made an absolute fortune for himself in the private sector, and good luck to him on that front. He's well credentialed in the economic area. Dan Merlino I do know well and is a really decent man, a highly intelligent one. Wrote a book called Safety Net, which runs to, I think, maybe 1,000 pages. So I promise him I will read it one day. So he's an intellectual powerhouse, a really decent man. And can I say, by the way, as he stood for a couple of weeks on pre-poll, he was subjected to the same abuse that a lot of Labor right candidates were subjected to by volunteers from the Socialist Alliance, Muslim Votes, and the Greens, although the Greens that I spoke to denied that they were part of that. But there was some very ugly stuff that happened on the campaign, on those pre-poll booths, from the right and the left, I do have to say, and I hope that in future we don't see any more of that.
Yeah, at any given time, I used to say this obviously as a Liberal staffer, I'd say this to people I work with, our mob's going to be out, we're going to be in opposition. So we want the best possible Labor Party in there when they are governing. I want them to govern well, I want them not to waste our money and all the usual things, because too often the Libs have to come in and clean up the mess. So I am pleased to see more people coming in with what I'd give, I'd call sort of policy grunt, smarts. And not just demonstrated paper smarts, not just a degree or a PhD, but evidence that they care about where the country's going, that they want to get into the policy debate, that they're more about, long generational solutions, if I can call it, Chris, as opposed to, a hit in question time or something to get on the front page of the telly tomorrow, that they want to fix the problems our country's facing.
Absolutely, and the other thing too is that I don't pick people, I pick policies, and the only thing I would say to the Labor Party about the policies it's got on energy at the moment, they're entirely wrong. That's really my major beef with where this party is heading, and that I believe that the economy is intimately tied, in fact completely tied, to energy and the way that energy is produced. And if we continue on the path that they've put us on, then we're on the road to poverty. It will be an absolute disaster, and the signs of that are already here, and they're everywhere else where the similar policies have been pursued. So that's my main beef. There are really good people on all sides of politics. I think one of the problems that we've had in recent years is that we too often descend into personal abuse about people rather than just looking at the policies that are on offer. I have a big beef with the Labor Party's energy policy. I have real concerns about its defence policy, and I have some concerns about its economic policy. That's where my concerns lie, but as far as the people go, if you get Dan Molino into Parliament and into a position of power inside the Labor Party, then you've got a very, very sensible person who's going to be arguing for the right kinds of things for Australia, I think.
Look, I agree there. He's Assistant Treasurer too. I don't think I mentioned that before. I want to pick up some comments. So David Littleproud's been re-elected the National Party leader. I want to pick up some some comments that my colleague Chris Kenny got out of him a moment ago when he interviewed him and they discussed net zero. Have a listen.
That's up to the party room. The leader doesn't make the determination in our party room. We draw on the collective of the wisdom of the entire party room. We'll have that conversation, and all our policies are up for review.
So the point here, Chris Uhlmann, is that the net zero is up for grabs. He's not saying that that's now the policy. He's saying that there'll be a wholesale review of everything, and it'll be a debate inside the party room whether they continue with net zero or whether the National Party drop it.
Absolutely, and look, I think that there's an intellectual hegemony which is happening in Australia at the moment, and the Liberal Party is going to perhaps be pushed into, which is that everyone should sign up to the policy of net zero. But I would say, read the room outside Australia. The United States has not signed up to it, China has not signed up to it, Russia has not signed up to it, India has not signed up to it. That's 60% of the world's emissions are not doing net zero. So the question then has to be, what on earth are we doing? The policy that we've signed up to, and we've only just seen the beginning of it in the transition of the electricity system, the harder part is yet to come, which is how do we make concrete, how do we make steel, how do we make plastic, and how do we make ammonia, which feeds half the world's population. That stuff has yet to be settled in any way that can be commercially applied. So to try and get to net zero means that you will see COVID-level interference in people's lives from now on. Now, I think there's a really good Liberal argument that you can make against that, which is that we don't want to see that level of interference in our lives, and we should let the market decide the kind of energy that we need to use. And of course, if you are determined to try and cut carbon emissions, there is only one source of power, apart from hydro, so one source of power that burns fuel that's capable of doing that. That is nuclear energy. That's a perfectly reasonable argument.
We will leave it there. Beautifully said, Chris Uhlmann, as always.